And here, what we are trying to do is this kind of debate that is immediate and collaborative between a lot of sectors. When I say engineering, I'm not saying it as a specific, it's engineering as a whole. Because obviously, we can bring some aspects between one discipline and another. And here are some examples of how the architecture took part of the engineering and adapted itself. And even the question that's more immediate, such as the pillars that are just in the middle of the living room, and many times there's a potential and it brings a sort of energy, and this obstacle starts being part of the architecture. The architect wanted this pillar in the middle of the room because there was a meaning, there was an objective. So there has to be this kind of dialogue between these disciplines. And the idea is kind of that. So obviously, my colleagues that have been there, is that when does it start engineering and when does it start architecture? Only those are aspects that lead us to think. And so we should promote this kind of connection between one and the other. And we shouldn't prioritize one because one isn't above the other. And obviously, we could take part of architects are already known. In architecture, we tend to see that where people look at the monsters and they want to copy them. And sometimes the conservative aspect that isn't very valorized. And sometimes they wish to hide, but sometimes it's not needed to hide. Sometimes being shown, it gives way more gains to it. So are some examples where I don't have to say anything. I can make the distinction between architecture and engineering. And going back to the theme, the question of industrializing. Obviously, this is nothing new. These are images of constructive techniques in more the oriental part of Europe after the Second World War. They had the necessity of reconstructing the cities with a very cheap and fast way of constructing cities. So we had to find ways to make it systematically, such as in Slovakia and other places where we see that the buildings have no identity. It's just constructive and not architecture. And that's why there's no an offer. That's why there's a name. But this wasn't just there. It was also in Berlin, where we see industrialized places where we just see concrete and nothing else. We just see a necessity. Today we talk a lot about the modular construction, which is a building built in 72, which were just modules that were anchored to this nuclear part. And the idea was that these modules they would be able to change and redone, but the lack of compatibility it made it so that this building had to be demolished. So this again takes the part of engineering and forces it to cooperate with architecture. We see a lot of ugly aspects of modular buildings. Even though we have a lot of technology, we still have very bad examples that are very focused on necessity of constructing, low prices, and no identity. This is the usual image that the public might have. But there are also good examples that allow us to see how the industrialized version can look good and can interact with engineering. The structural engineering here was fundamental. Taking some examples, these two buildings, they do have identity. When you look at the front part, we see that there's a sort of identity, there's a purpose, and this is industrialized. I don't think we have to show it. So architecture can make beautiful buildings with this kind of quality and worth. There are some other buildings. They're very volumetric. It's as if I can make a lot of have a lot of fun with the parts of the building. I can have a lot of identity. The truth is that all the system doesn't have to be just that. It can be a structure. It can be a part of my body. It can depend on the position and the addition of different parts of the puzzle. And it is possible. But this forces more work between the two parts. Some more examples. It's mixing of materials. It is possible as long as people care and think of how they're doing it. And now we can take these two disciplines and mix them together. Some more examples. They're more closely tied to the one my area, which is wood. But you can get beautiful buildings that have quality and identity. Taking into view, for example, a hotel in the south of Austria. We can give answer to a lot of, and with the question of densification, it is possible to go vertical by using by using modular. So we have to take into consideration the structural part, but also what's around that area. We still have a lot of this idea, which is very strict and rustic. And we can see the necessity for industrialization. And so construction can just attract manual labor, at least with the system that we currently have. When I entered, we were only 60, but it also got to 150. But today, they're only 46. And last year, it was the first time that it was full. There's no people that actually have the qualifications. So we have to change the way that we build with good intentions, because in the practice, no one can do it. So we have to take construction. We have to consider adding different parts that are simple. And that is the only way. And that's what we get with industrialization. If we enter with the wood part, because wood is very easy to cut and it's not heavy at all. And so I can get a quantity of control and quality. And nowadays, a company where we have making of wood, it's very industrialized. And so the activities that are actually necessary are only the ones that are done by humans. And that way we can bring more techniques. I am the person who makes the plans for structures, which is Ai Wei, which is a Chinese artist that's very known, that lived in Berlin. For a few years, but then decided to come to Portugal. And he bought a terrain and decided to make his atelier there. Making it around his house. And he built this where he can actually do his artistic part. His main idea is to use techniques from ancient China. So it's a part of a part of his collection. With Chinese architecture, with our current materials, but trying to emulate the traditional. This is very complex, and this is the final results. It's 50 by 60 meters. It's a very big, and so it makes the space very accessible. It has a central patio. It also has this lower part where there's offices, and everything else is where he does his artistic endeavors. And he also has a small coffer where he puts his most valuable artistic endeavors. And so this is very difficult. So there's no carpenters that actually can do this in Portugal. So we had to industrialize this. This is in terms of drawing, this is the final product. It has a lot of elements. which means these are different types. They couldn't be artisanal, so they had to be industrialized. This is what you wanted to emulate. We can see that the wood is very degraded, and there's a lot of different fixing. So this is a level of manual labor that's very complex, and it's not feasible for someone here. So we had to adapt this to industrialized manner. So even what is traditional, we can use what is innovation in a way to actually produce these kinds of things. I helped with licensing, but I'll only work on the project when you tell me I was going to work on this. And so the engineer has to be able to make a lot of equations when it comes to the degree of the wood and how it would work. And so we had to find alternatives that could answer what the client wanted and understand. And so we did a ton of models that would be able to simplify, but in a way also understand the complexities. I would even say how we did those pillars back there. And I will not even say how we worked with this because they were very big, and so we had to work around it. And we also had to think about how will we attach this kind of parts. With small pieces, it's easy, but with this scale, it's very difficult. So there was a lot of need for help. So here there is a need for a lot of debate between the different sectors. Why are the sizes different? Because the darker parts are the exteriors and the interior are lighter. And that way we got pieces like this. So when we talk about visualization, we talk about mobility in the car industry. So we talk about a house as a automobile, but when we go to a stand, they will only show us one or two models. So we cannot change the distance between rules. We cannot change everything about the car. It's a liberty that is conditional. So the idea here is how to a small amount of pieces that will allow us to answer different types of necessities and uses. Different types of residents, elderly spaces, hotels. And we created these kinds of Legos that just by using 6 will allow us to answer all these all these typologies and necessities. Limitations of the system. Just kidding. And we have already started showing the prototypes. And we will start with a prototype building. And in a bit, we'll start calling for architects to play with our Legos. Our Legos have this component of architecture. And there is one student of mine who is in my group. And it has been very good because now we can finish everything with a metric. And now we can simplify these kinds of Legos. So we have the Lego characterized. So we have it canonized. So we can have it be certified and enter the market. By having it certified, it stops being ours and the market starts using it. So the next part is asking the architects to use our Legos. And it's this. Thank you very much.